Right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today to our presentation that's titled Age-Friendly SDSU, Celebrating Age Diversity in Our Community. My name is Jocelyn Protopappas. I'm the Manager of Special Projects with San Diego State University's Center for Excellence in Aging and Longevity. We go by SEAL. And this is my boss. I'll let him introduce himself too.
Hi, everyone. Steve Hornberger, the co-director for the Center for Excellence in Aging and Longevity. And I'm really excited about this because for lots of reasons that we'll get into during the event, but clearly students and people who are going to be studying SDSU are going to be changing over this forthcoming years. And so this is an exciting beginning.
Thank you, Steve. That leads us right into what we're going to be talking about today. So today we are going to be discussing a little bit about what ageism is and how it affects individuals and communities. And we're going to put that into the context of what that looks like in higher education. Steve and I are going to be talking about why age diversity is important on campus, not just for creating a great culture, but also economically. It's going to also be really critical for places like SDSU in the forthcoming years, as Steve said. And finally, we're going to go through a couple scenarios that talk about what ageism currently might look like on campus and some strategies for helping us to build a more age-inclusive environment. During today's presentation, we want to encourage you to participate. You are welcome to drop some ideas in the chat. Steve, I might need your help if people answer things in the chat, just going over that. But we do want to participate because we are going to be thinking about, again, what this looks like on our campus, and all of us are engaged in this campus, so it can be helpful to hear your perspectives. All right, so we're going to do a little word association activity because we're going to be talking about ageism. It's helpful to kind of understand from our own perspectives where we already lie. So we're going to do a fun little activity to get started today. So either I should have told you at the beginning to grab a piece of paper, but if you did not, you can do this in the words section or the notebook section of your phone. But I want you to take a moment and on your piece of paper or on your notes section, I want you to write down the first 3 words that come to mind for you when you think of a college student, or more specifically, what you think about when you think about a San Diego State University college age student. So the first 3 words. The good news about this homework is I won't be collecting it. There's no judgment. So you can write down whatever comes to mind for you, but just the first 3 words. On the second half of the paper, or under another section on your notepad, go ahead and write down older adult. And I want you to write the first 3 words that pop up for you when you think of an older adult. We do this word association a lot, and when it comes to ageism, it's really helpful because, again, we're all coming from different places, but we all come from the same cultural norms, and so there's a lot of overlap that lies within here. So hold on to those words for just a second. And here in the chat, this is where I'd like you to share. If anybody feels comfortable, please feel free to share. When you thought of SDSU college student, what were some of the words that came up for you? If you're comfortable sharing.
I thought of young, vibrant, risky.
Risky? Did you say risky or frisky?
Risky.
Risky, okay.
Probably frisky too, but
yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, what part of the college do you work in? Yes, risky, frisky, all of the above. Absolutely. Okay.
Somebody wrote flip-flops, shorts, and skateboards.
Okay, I'm literally writing a paper right now that was describing SDSU's campus, and those were like some of the first descriptions that I used as well. I love that. Anybody else want to share some ideas that came up?
Paying for their education with multiple jobs.
Okay.
That's more than 3 words, but we get the point.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Okay. So I'm going to jump to our next screen here. These photos probably look very familiar to you. These are the stock images that are used very frequently in media when we are looking at SDSU's campus. So it shows our college students at SDSU. Thank you all for those of you who shared. These are really common words that come up for us when people are describing in this little scenario, describing college age students. The word young often pops up. the word flip-flops, backpacks, skateboards, those things often pop up, but also things like internships, trying to survive on a small budget, ramen, things like sorority life, fraternity life, parties, and let me see, I'm trying to think of the other words here. Exams, studying, stress. Those are some of the words that commonly pop up when we think about students. I really like to point these two things out. This is going to come up later in our discussion, but when we think about our SDSU students on campus, there is a lot of diversity in these pictures. We did really capture the skateboard vibe here in this one. But one thing that is missing from this diverse group of students is older adults and non-traditional age students, which is what we're going to be talking about today. All right, I want you to flip to, okay.
What were the three words for older adult?
Well, here's where we'll do this one.
Okay.
Don't you worry, Steve, I'm on it. All right, I want you to flip over to your other side of your page here, and let's talk a little bit about older adults. So go ahead and share, let me actually go back so I don't give you any ideas. Go ahead and share, when you thought of older adult, what were some of the first words that came up?
Mature, working, deliberate.
Oh, deliberate. That's a good one. I hadn't heard that one before.
I agree. Experienced.
Anybody else want?
What's the rest of you? Lifelong learning, upskilling, reskilling.
Okay. These are good because they sound like they're in the context of what an older adult is like on campus.
Basically, AI-driven career changes.
Okay.
Good one.
Those are good. Okay. Well, this group failed my experiment because often when we do this project, do this word association, what we find is that when people think about older adults, they tend to get categorized into two stereotypes. The first stereotype is that when people think about older adults, especially if they've worked in the field of helping in any sense of like healthcare or something like this or caregiving, people tend to categorize older adults in a deficit model. They tend to be categorized as ill, frail, and by this overall sense of loss. When people think about older adults, they think about loss of identity. So older adults are often transitioning out of the workforce. Older adults sometimes tend to be transitioning from things like parenthood into grandparenthood, which is not a loss, but is just a transition. Sometimes people think about loss of physical ability or physical senses. So that tends to come up a lot. People think about loss of loved ones, so partners, friends, family. So oftentimes people, when we're thinking about older adults, this thought of transitioning into elderhood is marked by a lot of loss and this idea that older adults need a lot of help. On the reverse side here is that when people think about older adults, sometimes there's this very Disney-fied version of older adults that come through. We've got our sweet grandma here who's baking, and she's baking, she's baking us cookies. She's a sweetheart. She's a darling. She's really cute. So there's this really patronizing version of older adults that comes through. So you guys were a shining example today that did not fall into these stereotypes, but oftentimes this is, as a general society, how we think about older adults. There's often this overwhelming sense of loss or our sweet, sweet grandma. When we categorize people into these two groups, we do not acknowledge the dynamic nature of aging. Aging is a very individualized process. When people hit 65, it is not a sudden set of milestones that they go through. Everybody's experience is really different. And with the combination of longevity right now, many people have been gifted 5, 10, 20, 30 more years to their life than in previous generations. And in no other category of our life do we say that you hit a certain age and the next 30 years look the same. That is just not the case. When we categorize people into these two groups, this is what ageism looks like. Ageism is the stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination against people on the basis of their age. In the world, in the field of aging, ageism is often talked about as the last ism that is socially acceptable. We can see ageism, it's highly steeped in our culture. You can see it almost everywhere. In media, in our institutions, in our organizations, ageism is very, very rampant. I want you over the next few days, if you aren't already aware of ageism, to be really keying in and thinking about and listening to and looking for signs of ageism in our society. If you have any trouble with this assignment, I encourage you to go down the aisle, the beauty aisle at CVS. You'll be horrified by the amount of anti-aging this and that you'll find in that aisle. Again, we often think of aging as this sign of loss, of a negative thing that happens to us. At SEAL, and I know Steve, my mission personally is to really reimagine what aging can look like, because aging is, first of all, an opportunity, and second of all, it's a privilege. So we really want to start rethinking about what aging looks like. The other really interesting thing about ageism is that it's bidirectional compared with any other ism. That doesn't tend to be the case. So there can be perspectives that older people are prejudice and stereotypes that people are putting on younger people. So for example, my stepmom is really stuck in the thought that millennials are lazy and coddled, which will make my skin crawl right off my body. And that's just a stereotype she can't get rid of. Or there could be the stereotypes we kind of already touched on, where younger people are looking up at older people and having certain prejudices and stereotypes. So again, ageism is really rampant in our culture, Western culture. It is something that we are, as they say, we are swimming in the water. Often we don't even realize that we're doing it or that it's happening. I want to take a moment here. As a social worker, I'm obligated to put this ageism perspective into the systems framework. The systems framework is a really nice way to understand complex interactions that happen within a system. By breaking down the subcomponents of the system. So that's macro, meso, and micro levels of interaction. What's really neat about this framework is that there's also the understanding that if one of these subsystems changes, it can have a big impact on the other two systems because they're all engaged with each other. I'm going to use our higher education system as the overall system that we're looking at. So when we think about macro, if we put ageism in the context of our higher education institution, and we're looking at the macro level system, that would be our institutional and cultural norms. So if we think about, is ageism happening on campus? Think about if you are a non-traditional age student, so a student who's over the age of 25, or you are an older adult who's showing up to campus. When you arrive on campus, are there markers on campus that culturally you are a fit on this campus, that you belong here? Are there policies in place that make sure that you have the things that you need? So one really key example that I've heard from older adults on campus is that one big challenge when you arrive at SDSU is the built environment, right? So our institution on a whole may have some challenges that make it difficult for you to navigate campus, to park on campus. But also there's some are there policies in those policies we were talking about in place to help support you, like on-campus housing or scholarships or things like that support you being at the institution. Meso is the smaller structure on campus. When we're looking at ageism, this might be the organizational and classroom structures that may or may not support ageism. Think about this from the community and organizational structure. So one thing that kind of popped up for me was curriculum design when we're thinking about ageism. When older adults and non-traditional age students return to campus, often their learning style can be different than younger students, and that's often not addressed or thought about when people are designing curriculum. There could also be some bias when it comes to faculty and staff and their perception about what older adults know as far as technology, and that can also impact the students' engagement in class or how they're feeling. One thing that really comes through too, when we were talking earlier about those pictures of students, imagine that you're an older adult applying to SDSU and you go onto the website and there's not a single person that looks like you. And then you arrive on campus and all of the student organizations are for people that are not in your age bracket or don't look like you. Again, your sense of belonging and welcoming you may not feel like you belong there. Micro level of interactions, these are the things that happen between people, and intrapersonal is how you feel about yourself. So interpersonal interactions may be things like the classroom dynamics. Sometimes we've heard from some of our older adult students that when they show up to campus and they're in the classroom, they've had students ask them questions like they're the professor. There's an assumption they're not a student. There could also be assumptions from other classmates that you don't, again, there's a lot of technology bias in this, being ignored for group projects, assuming you don't know what's going on. There can be a lot of different interpersonal interactions. So imagine again, now from this intrapersonal perspective, that you are raised in a society that tells you that aging is defined by loss, and that classrooms and higher education systems are meant for younger people. And then on top of it, you arrive to a campus that the macro, meso, and micro levels are not set up for you. What starts to happen is your own intrapersonal ageism can start to shine through. You may start to feel less and less like you belong on campus. So this very complex system is all to say that ageism is alive and well in higher education and is something that we all need to be thinking about for a few reasons that Steve and I are going to cover in just a minute here. So first things first, why is ageism important on campus? Some of you may be aware of the projected 2025 enrollment cliff. The enrollment cliff is the idea that due to the decline in birth rates that started in around 2007, that there will be less traditional age students who are just literally actually available to be enrolled in school. So since 2007, which is horrifyingly, like that was like over 18 years ago. I just realized that this morning. That was a scary moment. Since 2007, there's been a decline in our birth rate, which means that students that are in the traditional 18 to 24-year-old bracket who would be applying to school, there's just simply less of them. So there's going to be a projected decline in the number of people in that age bracket who actually apply to university. On top of that, there's some combination of factors going on right now where students are looking at a 4-year degree and then looking at things like certificate programs or trade schools or just entering the workforce that seem to be more feasible ideas when compared to actually trying to get a 4-year education due to the cost and length of time. So there's this projected enrollment cliff that is going to happen. And what we are starting to see across the nation is that there is an increase in students who are over the age of 25 that are applying to school. So this is that non-traditional age student. So this is really important that we are starting to rethink about what our college campuses look like and not focus strictly on traditional age students. I'm going to pass it over to Steve to talk a little bit about what's going on in general in the world of aging.
What you're seeing here is what's the projection of the demographics. This is building on what Jocelyn was highlighting about the changing demographics. In the space of a year, 100 years, this is what our society is going to look like. It's staggering. Some statistics that blew my mind was in all of human history, less than 1% of the people lived beyond past 65 years of age. And 2/3 of all of the people that have lived beyond 65 are currently alive. This is the world that we're now living in. And often we carry the socialization and the cultural norms and beliefs that we learned earlier that are now coming into play. What you see here, this chart tells you how initially we've learned how to focus on reducing and eliminating infant deaths. We've gotten better and better at that. And now the challenge is how do we how do we provide and support the longer lifespan? The way I've heard it is if you make it to 65, but for an accident, you're almost guaranteed to make it to 75. And if you make it to 75, but for an accident, you're almost guaranteed to make it to 85. This is what people refer to when they talk about the longevity dividend, that we're now having we now are projected to live longer. The question becomes, how do we want to live that long? What is it that we want to do? And you're seeing more and more in the literature is that instead of focusing on life expectancy, which continues to grow, though right now we're in some changes here, but generally it's been growing longer, bigger, longer and longer. It's not the number of years, but what's the quality of life that you have for those years. So you're seeing more people now focus on health span. How healthy can you stay for those extra 20 years? So this is a quick overview of it. You all know about the silver tsunami and the gray wave and all those other phrases, but basically by 2030, all the baby boomers will be over 65 and make up 20% of the US population. In California by 2030, 1 in 4 people will be over the age of 60. And by 2035, it's estimated that worldwide, I want to repeat that, worldwide, there'll be more people over 65 than under 5. This helps you to realize the staggering challenge we have about how do we want to, in our families and our own personal lives and in our community and our society, how do we want to live with each other, and how might we make those health span live longer and longer? Again, in the diversity question in San Diego between 2020 and 2030, the older adult population will be 30% more diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, language spoken, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. So if we're not addressing well what we have now, just think what it's going to be like in the 5 or 6 years from now, and that diversity. They're going to be more diverse in terms of all those social factors and poorer on average. And so the question becomes, what do we want to do with that? How are we going to live with one another? That increased longevity, the fastest growing age group in San Diego is over 80-year-olds. Let me repeat that. The fastest growing age group in San Diego is those people over 80. And what you're seeing there in terms of the long-term impact, those are the social determinants of health, the social drivers of health. And clearly, a lot of the work that we've been doing in the Center SEAL is around age-friendly communities, where we're working, and we're now in Encinitas, which is our 9th city, to look at how do you change the environment so that it becomes age-friendly. And that focuses on, like Jocelyn referenced, built environment, social participation, communication, etc. And what we're finding is community residents certainly have good ideas and want to make it different. Municipal staff want to do it, and it becomes a question of how do we raise it and make it reasonable to say, well, we're here, and how do we need to change over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years so that it becomes more and more friendly for older adults. AARP has this fascinating expression: if it's livable for an 80-year-old, it's livable for an 8-year-old. And I think that's true. And I think we need to begin to highlight that this is not just for older adults. This is for all of us. And frankly, if you think about it, the age group that's going to reap the benefits of age-friendly communities is not older adults per se. It's probably going to be the children and the grandchildren of the older adults, because they're going to have their whole life in that kind of an environment. This is just some stats that Jocelyn put together so that you can see the change that's happening in SDSU. For me, the striking part there is the enrollment by age in terms of global campus. Clearly, we've historically seemed to have been shunting off our older adults into non-credit bearing global campus certificates, interesting programs, all valuable. But I think we need to begin to consider, how do we help older adults remain in the workforce? It's clear with the declining birth rate that in the not distant future, we're going to have 5 or 6 different generations working in large companies and large organizations. And I don't know about you, Jocelyn joked about the stereotypes about the different generations. Try to imagine an office where everybody has a different idea of how to work, how long they should work, when they should work, what skills should they have, how motivated they should be, and what competencies they have. I joke about that it took 2 years for my students who are under 30 and my staff who are under 30 to tell me, Steve, if you leave us a voice message, we never hear it. You have to text us if you want to communicate with us. And I'm just stubborn, so it took me 2 years to finally say, okay, I concede. And now that I don't send voice messages, I'm stunned to realize that some people don't even have a voice message application on their phone. It just blows my mind.
So I threw this slide in here because I think Steve and I have, or well, mostly me, I've been throwing around the idea of like what a non-traditional age student is, but this basically means anybody who's outside of that typical 18 to 24-year-old. And I think it's really important to be thinking about traditional versus non-traditional, because when we have non-traditional age students, and that could be people who are 30, or that could be students who are 65, it makes a big difference in how we educate them and how we interact with them on campus. So what makes these non-traditional age students different? First and foremost is life stage. If you think, I'll give you some just, high level examples here, but if you think about an 18-year-old who's coming to campus for the very first time, they're moving away from home, they're having that, huge transition. Their experience on campus and the resources that they need is a heck of a lot different than somebody who's in their 30s or 40s who has a family at home or has another job that they're trying to manage while they're going to school, versus an 85-year-old who is back at school for a lifelong learning experience or an encore career. So the life stage is really, really critical, because the needs and demands of the student are really going to be different depending on what they have going on at home. Motivation really differs too. Again, think about that 18-year-old. Their reason for coming to school it really is different than somebody who may be coming back because they were unable to complete their education the first time because they became a parent, or somebody who is coming back to school because they, are in their 50s and they want to get that advanced degree. So the motivation matters too. When we think about that, I'll just give you the example. When I came back to graduate school, I was in my 30s. I'd been a working professional for 10 years. And my motivation was a lot different in getting my master's degrees than students who were in the master's programs who were coming right out of undergrad. What I was looking for in my education was very specific and distinct, versus some other people were still had some flexibility in what they were looking for in their education.
Mm.
Responsibilities can also look very different. This to us at SEAL is really critical. This is our caregivers is what really comes to mind for me. Students really have a challenge when they this is not to say that 18 to 24-year-olds don't have parenting responsibilities or caregiving responsibilities for older adults, but it's much more likely for somebody who is a non-traditional age student to be serving in some type of caregiver role. And that impacts your education in a big way. If you have somebody who's relying on you, or two generations that might be relying on you, if you're in that sandwich generation with young kids and then an older adult, it really can impact how you want to receive your education and how you're able to get to class and all those type of things. The final thing
Jocelyn, on that responsibilities, the AARP did a national study. 25% of all college students are caregivers. Now, more than half of them are just parents who have young children, but it's that other half that are really taking care of being a caregiver for a family member. And so you're seeing that, to build on her point, they're not as available. They're certainly more stressed in terms of how they're going to manage both their school requirements, work if they need it, as well as the home responsibilities. And they become very isolated because they're not able to participate in what's the traditional college experience, because they have to take care of either their young child or their family member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that kind of comes with this motivation, the life stage, those type of things, is that I'm thinking about things like internship placements. And sometimes internships are intended for people who are beginning their careers, and it's not always taken into consideration when you have lived experience, like if you were a caregiver for X amount of years and you're returning to school, or if you were a professional. Sometimes that's not taken into consideration and can be more common experience for those who are non-traditional aged. The last piece I'll touch on here is preferred learning styles. So many times a traditional age student, a younger student, is more open to lecture style experiences, or according to the research, but students who are older tend to prefer things like case studies and more experience-based learning, because they bring a lot of experience to the table. So when we're thinking about preferred learning styles, again, this could also just be the difference between online versus in person. This could be group work versus individual work. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration as our campus may transition into having more non-traditional age students. All right, so this next slide here is talking about the multi-generational workforce. So for our campus so far, we've mostly been focused on like what is the experience of students on campus and why it's important to be considering different age groups. Steve touched on this briefly, but if we also look at our staff and faculty at SDSU, we are seeing 4, if not 5 generations of people trying to work together. There can be some huge benefits and some big challenges when we're trying to navigate this. Steve briefly mentioned that we have a multi-generational workforce at SEAL. When we have interns that are traditional age, we actually have every single generation here represented at SEAL. I'm not calling Steve a boomer, but Steve might be a boomer. And then my boss Michelle and my colleague Fernando are Gen X. I'm a millennial, and our interns tend to be Gen Z. And we saw last semester what can happen when communication styles tend to cross, or the level of work hours and work availability and these type of things can come to clash when we don't have a good understanding of what each person is looking for in a work day and how to communicate and get through things. We're doing fine, and we've figured out a way to communicate well. Steve no longer leaves voicemails, and he has gotten used to text. So we're all coming together very beautifully. But I think the really critical piece to remember here too is it's not all about the challenge, right? Having a multi-generational workforce also brings a ton of benefits. There can be a lot of really great things that come from this. People, when they are at different stages of their career, can help to support younger people. So older generations may be wanting to leave behind legacy projects, or and that can help with mentoring younger generations who are looking for career advancement. There can be a lot of different perspectives that are brought to the table. And as Steve mentioned earlier, there can be a lot of different skills that are brought to the table. Younger generations may be more fluent in technology, and they can help to bring new ideas to the table in that way. So when we have the policies and procedures and things set up to support our workforce that may be multi-generational, and we have experiences like mentorship and opportunities like that, it can make our workforce more cohesive and bring together all of our different generations. So let's talk through some different scenarios here. I put these scenarios up here because these are things that we've heard from students or ideas that have come through in other listening sessions that we've had. I think at this point, when you think about your own experience on campus, I really want you to think about how your own age stereotypes or ageism that exists in you has either impacted your sense of belonging on campus, or how your thoughts and actions may have impacted somebody else's belonging on campus, just because, again, ageism is the water that we swim in. So I put up some scenarios just to walk through and share with you some experiences that we've heard. So George is a 57-year-old graduate student. He consistently faces dismissive behavior in the classroom from his classmates. In a group project, they often assign him administrative tasks and roll their eyes when he tries to share ideas. One of his classmates comments that George is out of touch with modern perspectives. Felicity is really excited to return to college. She was unable to complete her initial bachelor's degree due to caregiving and family demands when she was younger. When she arrives at Career Services, her counselors assume that she is here for a career transition. She directs Felicity to resume building workshops for experienced professionals and workshops for second career professionals. Felicity is overwhelmed. And finally, Jose has recently graduated with his PhD. What luck, he lands a position at the university. Despite his track record for excellence in research and teaching, he often feels like other professors underestimate him due to his young age. The longer he is in his role, the more he starts to notice that he is questioning his own abilities as well. So hopefully in all of this rambling and in all of these case scenarios here, we've shown you that ageism is alive and well on campus. But it's also really important that we are starting to think about how do we address that? How do we make sure that SDSU is ahead of the curve when it comes to making sure that our campus is a place where people feel like they belong, and that we are age friendly. All right. So first things first, one of the best things that you can do when you're trying to make sure that your campus is more age friendly is to become an age friendly university. An age-friendly university is a higher education institute that has committed itself to promoting inclusion, engagement, and opportunity for learners of all ages. All right, now this part is always like pretty devastating to me because I run our age-friendly university program at SDSU, but for those of you who do not know, SDSU has been an age-friendly university since 2021. The process in becoming an age-friendly university was that Steve and some fellow colleagues from across the university gathered up an inventory of all the age-friendly work that we are doing on campus, sent it to our president, De La Torre, and she said that, yes, SDSU wants to be age-friendly. We got the designation. And since then, me and my team have been working slowly but surely to build up our inventory of research and projects on campus to make this place feel like it's a place for learners of all ages. Now, sadly, we did get an email the other day where an older student told us this place is still not age friendly and this is a joke. So that pretty much sent me into a spiral for the whole day because I've been working really hard. But on the flip side, it's critical to me to hear those type of things because this work and this awareness needs to continue to advance in order to make sure that people of all ages feel like this is their home, SDSU is their university. So you're aware, all age-friendly universities follow 10 core principles. These principles, I won't read every single one to you, but just so you have an idea of what they all say, the principles reinforce that older adults and non-traditional age students are engaged in all core activities at the university. This includes education, research. This includes things like health and wellness programs. The age-friendly university principles also encourage intergenerational learning opportunities. They encourage opportunities for older adults to have flexible learning schedules and things like personalized career development and educational opportunities. So when we applied as an age-friendly university, basically we had to find 3 or 4 principles that our university is doing well. And then from there, we had to talk about what we are going to be looking to do in the future. So I'm sure if you read through some of these, you can see where SDSU does really thrive. We have an awesome OSHER program. We have a 60+ program that allows older adults to get discounted education. We have a Center for Excellence in Aging and Longevity where we are doing a lot of the work that's on here. But there's still a lot of room for making improvement to continue to make this an age-friendly campus. There are tons of benefits to being an age-friendly campus. I'm going to encourage all of you. So we are right now in the midst of our very first age-friendly university month at SDSU. So it's October 15th. We're exactly in the middle of our age-friendly university month. We are having weekly webinars that are highlighting what other universities are doing and what SDSU is doing to be an age-friendly university every single Tuesday. And this has been really, really inspiring because these first couple points here, the more vibrant learning campus and inclusivity in higher education, really come through when other universities and our own university are talking about why this age-friendly piece is so important. That intergenerational opportunity, not only does it allow people to come to the table and share their experiences, but it's also one of the best ways to defeat ageism. That sounds so dramatic, but it's very easy for us to put other people in boxes and to stereotype about them when we have no interaction with them. It's very easy for young students to continue to think that older adults live in nursing homes in a far off place. And it's very easy for older adults to think, younger generations live on their phone and have no social skills, which is what we often hear, unfortunately. So, but when those two groups can get into a classroom together and have positive interactions, it really does make a big difference when it comes to ageism. You will find that non-traditional age students and older adults tend to be really focused on this lifelong learning piece. They want to get involved. I think, as Steve was saying earlier, seeing that a majority or a large number of people who are involved in our global campus program are non-traditional age students is saying something. Those programs tend to be flexible. They tend to be online, and they tend to be programs that offer short education opportunities. So certificate programs and micro learnings and those type of things. So there are a lot of lifelong learners out there, and maybe they just aren't necessarily wanting to focus on a degree or something like that, but that is an opportunity we need to be pursuing. And the reduced isolation and loneliness piece is really critical. We know now, I think especially post-COVID, but there's been a lot of research on the impacts of social isolation and loneliness. It can be as devastating as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It does tend to be less expensive than that habit, but it can be that impactful for our health. So really,
Jocelyn, let me give the example of what we did. We created a call hub where Meals on Wheels identified some of their clients who were at risk of being lonely and isolated. They weren't full scale at that because they had, they have a care coordination to take care of the acuity. It was this group that things just didn't feel right. And so we recruited a dozen grad students and they identified 12 people. And we did what's called a social intervention. It was basically a 15-minute social call once a week for 4 weeks. Well, we did longer than 4 weeks, but after 4 weeks, we did another survey in terms of the loneliness scale that UCLA has created. It's a 7-question scale. And what was surprising, literally after 4 weeks, the older adults' isolation score was reduced. They felt more connected. They felt more that somebody was interested in them and what they were doing. The surprising thing that we didn't imagine, we thought that that would happen, but the surprising thing was the grad students themselves also, their social isolation score reduced because, and for me, Jocelyn's highlighting some of the issues that happen in community and college life for even traditional students. But for me, the bigger issue was if we can develop more ways of connecting, dialoguing, interacting, it's beneficial for everybody. It's not just, oh, we're doing a nice thing for older adults so they can live longer, better. I think we're trying to make sure that everybody has a more enhanced and well-being and health.
yeah, thank you for putting that in there, Steve. It always is remarkable to me that when we think about social isolation and loneliness and how devastating the effects can be, that a 15-minute phone call can make a difference. So I'll just, of course, I have to say I was one of the graduate students. I was in the social work and public health program at SDSU when this pilot program started for the call hub. And so I was one of the callers. And like Steve's saying, at first, again, I am a millennial. I was like, boy, do I not want to get on a telephone and talk to somebody. But, after that initial shock of having to pick up a phone, I connected with an older adult every single week for 3 months, and then longer after that. And, I was in the midst of an unpaid internship, working 3 jobs, writing a thesis, planning a wedding. I couldn't add more things to the list that were overwhelming. But, as often as I was on campus and interacting and doing all these things, I was pretty isolated. And this volunteer opportunity connected me with somebody that I never would have talked to before. And he and I shared music interests. And every week we had homework where we sent each other a different artist to listen to. And it was just this like really special opportunity to connect with somebody. And it had a huge impact on my mental health as well, because music, first of all, is my favorite, but also I was, having this interaction, and it was really positive. So, yeah, that all is just, another thing that makes these intergenerational connections so wonderful. We have expanded that program in case anybody's interested. We saw how beneficial it is for both parties, and we've expanded it to go outside of just students. Anybody in our community in San Diego is now able to join our Call Hub program as a volunteer to connect with older adults. In our initial pilot, we had about 800 minutes of phone calls, and now we're averaging somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 minutes a month in phone calls. Good thing we don't have to pay that phone bill. No, just kidding. But it's a wonderful program. If anybody wants to volunteer for that, please, that's a separate advertisement for this whole program outside of this webinar, but please let me know. Okay.
Some people want to be the caller as well as the callee. So depending on what you want to, how you want to connect, that opportunity is available.
So this whole age-friendly university thing, there's a lot of benefits that come with it. I encourage you to check out our other webinars that we're doing about how other universities are embracing their age-friendly university connection. We have a person coming next week to talk about how changing the built environment on her campus made a big difference in engaging with older adults. And the subsequent week after that, our last week of October, we have a webinar coming up where a woman is talking about how integrating older adults into her classroom for a class that was the psychology of aging made a difference in intergenerational connection and learning about aging. So some really cool ways to talk about the age-friendly university and its important impacts. So the final two things that we're going to talk about is some strategies for improving, in our last few minutes here, strategies for improving the age-friendly university at SDSU. First, we're going to focus on students, and then we'll talk about what it looks like to support the workforce. There are no right or wrong answers here, but I want to hear from you guys. What are some things that we could do at SDSU to help support non-traditional age students and older adults on our campus?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is to create venues, forums, and events that bring them together specifically.
I
So
love that. Okay.
yeah, so folks can, build connectivity and recognize that there are other, students that are in the same, kind of age range and life experiences, things of that nature.
Yeah, we often talk about it, Seal, like I'm sure you guys have heard of like the third space, like a place that you stay outside of your home that makes you feel like you belong there. Imagine if we had a space on campus where people who were older or a non-traditional age, where they could go and gather and be around people like them that made them feel like part of this campus. We're throwing around the idea of in the spring having something like a mixer for non-traditional age students and older adults and our regular age students, that wasn't the right word, traditional age students to come together to hang out, right? To make them feel welcome. Thank you, Dejan. That's a really great idea. Got some ideas in the chat here.
What I'm thinking a lot about is that your age is just one of those identities, right? And so even embedded in the other spaces that kind of speak to our other identities, to have groups within them that also support the different ages, right? Just
Love
because
it.
we're so layered, right? And so especially when you were talking about the milestones, some of those milestones aren't always dictated by age, but they may be shared between age groups, right? So it's very interesting.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. That's a great idea. Somebody, Victoria said, scheduling office hours at times that are good for older people, like not during dinner. I love that. We hold quite a few listening sessions out in our community, and we are still trying to figure out the time that works for older people, because sometimes it's during the day, sometimes it's at night, but this is really great. It's actually talking to your class and asking when is a good time for everybody, or trying to find the best time. But yeah, I really like that. Ensuring that those that teach class encourage the benefits of age diversity and breadth and the depth of that all learners bring to class. Absolutely, right? I think that's a critical piece. One of the principles in the age-friendly university is talking to students about longevity and the benefits of being engaged with older adults. That's one of the principles. So I think in order to change the narrative about what aging is, we need to have more conversations that show aging in a positive perspective. Okay. Somebody said 4:30 a.m. Yes, that's it's a perfect time for office hours. So Victoria had to hop off. Okay, thank you, Victoria. Yeah, these are all really fabulous ideas. I'll show you just a slide. This is not, a comprehensive list by any means, but this is just some initial ideas that popped up. And I think we actually covered some of these. Flexibility with the class schedule. So I had a professor who told me during our public health, she was a public health professor, and she said, if you need to miss class for something, there's an alternative assignment. And so you'd have to watch a video or write an essay or whatever, but it allowed you to be an adult who could miss class without feeling like you were the worst individual in the world. But that flexibility was really key. People do like asynchronous classes and those type of things as well. But I think the flexibility with class schedule is pretty great, especially for those who have caregiving needs. Alternative education opportunities. This is becoming really popular right now. Four-year degrees are challenging and require a lot of work, time, and commitment. So micro-credentialing is like smaller snippets of that have a really specific focus or major. and certificate programs, accelerated tracks or credits for lived experience, paid, this is so key, paid internships and fellowships, inclusive spaces on campus, resources for caregiving, whether it's childcare or support and respite for older adults, peer support and networking opportunities. We covered that. Addressing the digital divide. I think this one is, we often think about older adults needing support with technology, but I think that there's this assumption that anybody that comes to college has a baseline level of understanding of technology, and that's not necessarily true. One of our colleagues was telling us that her son, who's a younger person, one time sent an email and she was like CC'd on it, and she told her son, "Hey, you made a big mistake in that message." And he said, "Oh, Mom, don't worry about it. I'll delete it," thinking that the email would come out of that person's inbox. And so even though there's young people out there, sometimes the basic understanding of technology and things isn't as good as we assume that it is. So the digital divide is for everybody. Last night at a listening session, we met a woman that has been a computer scientist since the birth of the internet. She probably knows more than I do. So, we have to understand that the digital divide can go both ways, and there needs to be a baseline understanding of how to use technology for everybody. This one is really important to me. Media and recruitment flyer that reflect the shifting demographics of our population. Again, everything that you see at SDSU is young people, and it doesn't necessarily feel welcoming. Even, again, for people who might be in their 30s or 40s returning to school, it doesn't always feel like the most welcoming place when you don't see yourself reflected in the folks who are at the university. And the last piece is our age-friendly university. Again, please check out SEAL's website. Steve put that in the chat. I think Rachel did too. We are doing a lot of work right now and trying to figure out ways to continue to promote and bring awareness to the age-friendly university at SDSU. Sorry, we're running a little short on time. My next question was going to be, how do we support staff and faculty when we have this multi-generational workforce? Some key starting points for this are going to be things like age inclusivity bias training. With ageism being the last accepted ism, sometimes we don't even realize the things we're saying and doing are ageist and can impact those around us who are of a different age. So there's things like the AARP Disrupting Ageism courses that can be brought to campus to help start the conversation around ageism, where Steve and I are happy to do more chats and talks with people. Hiring and onboarding and retention practices that value and support staff of all ages. This requires a pretty in-depth look at how we hire and retain folks. Flexible working arrangements, professional development opportunities that allow staff to stay up to date on the ever-changing world of technology. Caregiving resources, support groups for people who are caregivers. This is a quick shout out. On the 20th, next Monday, we are having a caregiver resource fair on campus. This is a collaboration between SEAL and the Women's Resource Center. This is going to be a resource fair for staff, faculty, and students, and it's going to have a mix of resources for parenting caregivers and people that are caring for older adults and loved ones. So please come check it out. It's from 11 to 1 p.m. in the Student Union courtyard. There'll also be a panel of student caregivers who are going to talk about their experiences, the good, bad, the in-between. So just a quick shout out there if you're looking for caregiver resources. And finally, support and intergenerational opportunities, whether that's research, mentorships between the generations that work together, and continuing the conversation. So as staff and faculty, your job today is to tell one more person we are an age-friendly university. All right. This is a final note. I love this quote because it speaks to that longevity dividend that Steve was talking about. If as a society, we embrace longevity by investing in the health, the education, and our workforce, we can reap the social, cultural, and economic benefits that come along with that. Age-friendly communities, universities, and ecosystems recognize that older adults contribute meaningfully in their communities. All right. This is us. This is me and Steve. We work at the Center for Excellence in Aging and Longevity. Please come check us out. Continue the conversation. You're welcome to email seal@sdsu.edu. And that is our LinkedIn right there if you want to follow along with our work.